Today we're going to be learning how to draw anime hair. Hair can be a bit tricky. It's one of those things that looks simple, but when you actually try to draw it, it either turns into spaghetti or a helmet. In this video I'm going to show you how I personally approach it step by step, and honestly it's not that complicated once you break it down. We're going to start with the basic structure, how hair flows from the crown, wraps around the head, and how to think about it in 3D. Then we're going to do a male hair demo, showing how tighter angular shapes give it that sharp stylized look. After that, we jump into a female hair demo, focusing on flow, volume, and those looser shapes. And finally, we'll go over stylized hair tips, how to exaggerate motion and form to add more personality to your characters. If you find this video helpful, consider subscribing. It really supports the channel and lets me know you want more videos like this. Alright, let's jump in. If you haven't seen my previous video on how to draw anime heads, I'll show you this general template, which I'll put on screen right now. This is important because you can't really draw hair without first having a solid head structure. I'll be editing this template slightly so that it works as a guide you can reuse whenever you want to draw hair. Feel free to screenshot or save it for later. If you remember from our last video, or if you're already familiar with the Loomis method, you know it's important to define the hairline. This hairline usually wraps from the front center line, curves along the side slice of the head, and reaches toward the top of the ear. Of course, hairlines vary. Some characters like Vegeta or Renji have very specific ones, but whether or not you draw them depends on your character and whether the hair will cover it anyways. Another key element is the crown, the central point from which hair flows outward. Think of it like the spout of a fountain. From that one area, the strands radiate and fall in different directions. It helps give the hair a natural sense of movement. Now, generally speaking, you can break the hair down into four main parts: what sits at the front, covering the forehead or top of the head, the side bangs, framing the face, the back section which follows the curve of the skull, and any extra features like ponytails, pigtails, buns, whatever the style calls for. Here's how that looks from the side and in different angles. Again, feel free to pause and save this as a reference. Now, structure-wise, this is basically all you need. For male characters, it's often a little different. They usually don't have long bangs or prominent front sections, but we'll get into that later. Before we move on, though, there are a few more things I want you to keep in mind, because they'll instantly level up your drawings. First, remember that hair is a physical object. It has volume and thickness. So when you draw it over your head template, it should sit slightly above the skull, not flat on it. Depending on the style, it can even extend outward or backward from the character's silhouette. Think of Ochako from My Hero Academia or Mikasa from Attack on Titan. Their hair has a present, it takes up space. And second, think of hair like ribbons or sheets of paper. When it bends, you often see both the front and the back side, especially in more stylized designs. But what matters most is the flow. All the strands should feel like they're being pulled from the same point or direction. That's what makes the hair feel natural and dynamic. Just like how water flows from a fountain spout, your hair should follow a rhythm from that crown or parting line. Before jumping into strands and details, start by sketching the overall shape of the hairstyle. Think about the length, volume, and flow. This rough silhouette helps you stay focused on the big picture so you don't get lost in tiny lines too early. Keep it simple. In fact, depending on your style, this shape can even serve as the final look, especially in more minimal or stylized drawings. When you start adding individual strands or clumps, think about balance. If one strand juts out to the left, then try having another one jut to the right. This creates a natural mirror rhythm that keeps the design dynamic. Without this, the hair can start to look repetitive or stiff. Think of it like posing a character. Asymmetry adds life. If your character has spiky hair, keep the entire hairstyle in that sharp, angular style. Mixing in smooth, flowy curves in just one section will break the visual harmony, unless you're doing it intentionally for contrast. Consistency helps the hair feel like a unified part of the character design rather than a bunch of mismatched pieces. This is a classic design principle. You start with big shapes, you break them into medium ones, and then add small details. In hair, that means choosing where the most detail goes. For example, maybe the front bangs have lots of intricate lines and shading, while the top or back of the head stays simplified. This creates a visual hierarchy. Your viewer's eye will naturally go to the most detailed part first, and the simpler areas help keep the design readable and not overwhelming. In this example I'm showing, the front has the most detailed clumps and shading, while the rest becomes simpler as we move upward or back. This trick is often called the illusion of detail. By carefully choosing where to put complexity, your brain fills in the rest, making the drawing feel more complete than it actually is. Now, as mentioned before, this template applies generally to the subject. For males, it's best not to take it literally, but more so as a reminder of the idea. Male hairstyles often emphasize structure and form. You're usually dealing with tighter shapes that stay closer to the scalp. I like to begin with the silhouette, blocking out the general form of the hairstyle before worrying about detail. You can think of it in chunks or clumps, typically 3 to 5 large ones that follow the flow of the head. These clumps usually taper toward the ends, which gives that sharp, stylized look you see in anime or comic characters. One thing that really helps is to imagine the hair as a sculpted object. Where does it lift off the scalp? Where does it fall with gravity? Messy hair might spike out in different directions, while neat or short styles will hug the head more closely. Pay attention to how the hair part divides the flow, especially with side parts or undercuts. And don't overdo individual strands at this stage. It's way more effective to focus on strong, confident shapes that suggest the form. Detail can come later with texture lines or highlights. Now let's move on onto female hair. The biggest difference here is volume and flow. The shapes tend to be rounder, softer, and more dynamic. I start the same way, laying down the basic silhouette, but instead of sharp, tapered clumps, I go for long, sweeping curves that follow the motion of the head. Female hairstyles often cascade down, wrap around the shoulders, or lift up into buns or ponytails, so gravity plays a bigger role into how the hair behaves. Think of hair like fabric. It stretches, folds, and overlaps. Use those long curves to guide the viewer's eye across the form. I like to layer the hair in passes. First, a big overarching shape, then some medium strands that follow the same rhythm, and finally light texture lines that add depth. Don't try to draw every strand. It will flatten out the drawing. Instead, focus on creating a sense of motion. If the hair flows to the right, build your curves and overlap in that direction. If the style is simple, like a bob or straight long hair, use curves to imply weight and bounce. Also, don't forget that face framing strands can add a lot of personality. A single curved piece over the forehead or cheek can do more than a dozen extra lines. Now, if you want to give the illusion of movement, like the hair is being blown by the wind, it's important to start by identifying the crown point or parting line we talked about earlier. From that point, let the hair flow outward in the direction of the wind, keeping in mind how different chunks or strands will be pulled along. After you've established the base flow, you can add detail and texture like you normally would, following the motion to keep it natural and dynamic. Once you understand the structure and flow of both types, it gets easier to mix and match, and that's where stylization comes in. Now that we've covered structure and the concept of flow, let's talk about stylization. This is where you get to break the rules a little bit. Stylized hair isn't about realism, it's about expression, exaggeration, and personality. First, think in shapes. Instead of drawing individual strands, simplify the hair into bold, clean forms that support your character's vibe or personality. The spiky hair made of sharp triangles gives off a bold, aggressive energy, great for a fiery or rebellious character. Flowy hair built with smooth, ribbon-like curves feels soft and graceful, often used for calm, mysterious, or elegant types. Then there's wild or untamed hair, where clumps overlap and break symmetry, perfect for chaotic, intense, or quirky characters. These shapes aren't just decoration, they help tell the story before your character even speaks. You can also exaggerate the volume. Hair can defy gravity, float, twist, or even act like an extension of emotion, especially in anime or fantasy art. You want the character to feel powerful, then give them upward flaring shapes. That's why Super Saiyan Goku's hair explodes upward, or why Eraserhead's hair lifts when he activates his powers. Want a softer, more gentle look? Let the hair drape and wrap around the body, following the form with smooth downward flow. Another trick is to design the silhouette. Good stylized hair adds to the character's outer shape. You should be able to recognize the character just from the outline. So when you're stylizing, don't just ask what looks good, rather ask what fits the character's story. And remember, it doesn't have to be complex. Some of the most iconic hair designs are just a few big, confident shapes done well. Stylization gives you the freedom to bend reality, but it still works best when you understand the basics. So now that you've got those down, experiment and push it. And that's it for this tutorial. I hope this helped you understand how to approach hair, whether it's a structure, flowy, or completely wild. If you learned something new, drop a comment and give it a like, or let me know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching and never stop drawing.